Good evening from Sofia, Bulgaria. I tried launching this live stream with Rayko
Deja vu.
Alexiev a moment or two ago and had nothing but technical difficulties. I think those technical difficulties are over and we're going to give this a try, and I apologize for whoever's tuned into the first one. I am joined by Rayko Alexiev. Thank you for joining me, Eric.
Thank you for having me.
Will's saying hi. Hi, Will. And whoever's tuned in, can you tell us if the volume is okay? Eric, how about you introduce yourself a little bit before we get into your father and his legacy?
Well, I'm nobody that anybody really has any reason to know, but
You know you're somebody.
Yeah. I work for Bulgaria Analytica, who Josh's audience might be familiar with because Josh also writes for them and has done editing for them in the past.
I think you stole my job.
I did steal your job. Yeah.
What's up with that?
There's a new chairman in town. We had to trim the fat a little bit.
Why am I letting you on my broadcast after you stole my job?
Well, I do appreciate it.
Sorry. So what is your job now?
Right now, I mean, I am on the board just because.
You're on what board? I don't think the audience is familiar.
The advisory board of the company, just because there's a necessity for somebody with the Alexiev last name to sort of be involved, I guess. And then outside of that, I write, I do some analysis, I do editing. Basically everything that you used to do until the young buck came to town.
How old are you saying I am? Although I have a big birthday coming up.
That's true, yeah. Istanbul. If anybody's in Istanbul, you gotta get in touch with this guy. An exclusive event.
It better be an exclusive event. I don't want Antifa there or something.
Oh, did I tell you I stumbled into an Antifa party by accident here recently?
Maybe we'll get into that when we discuss a little bit about life in Bulgaria. All right, so for those of you who are not aware, Bulgaria Analytica is a publication largely about geopolitical events, and it's a geopolitical analysis publication based here in Bulgaria with a focus on the wider region, which is the Balkans and the Black Sea countries, namely Russia and Turkey and Ukraine. We'll throw in Georgia as well. A lot about Eastern Europe, a lot about Russia, Turkey, some places that I frequent. I'd like to spend more time in Russia. Would you give me a visa or press accreditation, please? But that's another story. So this is largely inspired by none other than your father, Alex Alexiev, who someone's saying hello from England, hello from Bulgaria. Thank you for joining us.
Cheers.
Cheers. So Alex Alexiev brought me out here, and I guess brought you out here, but unfortunately he is no longer with us, and for me that was very hard to take, and I'm sure for you that was much harder to take. So can you tell us a little bit about who your father was and the legacy he left behind?
Yeah, I mean, where do you start, really, with somebody like that? As I mentioned in the previous stream that had some technical difficulties, he was...
The Bulgaria Analytica's tuned into our stream.
Oh, great.
Bulgaria Analytica, thank you for letting us use your studio. We're doing a little studio crashing right now, but we're promoting you.
Yeah, we won't say anything controversial with the slogan behind us.
Speak for yourself.
Anyway, I mean, where do you start with a guy like that? Like I said before, I can't imagine a situation where he wasn't the most intelligent person in the room. He was as humble though as he was intelligent, as humorous as he was generous. I could sing his praises to the end of my life and still maybe not complete the list. And then just life experience. It's really a shame that he was so humble because he was opposed to anybody writing anything about him, whether it's a Wikipedia article or a book. I asked several times if I could just interview him, just put my phone on the table and just ask him questions, and he would always say, "Oh, who would be interested in that?" And it's really something that I'll regret till my dying day.
That's a regret of mine as well. I never brought him onto this channel when I had so many opportunities to do so. And the only video I ever did with him was one video here talking about censorship on social media, which like of all and blockchain technology, which of all things after the life he lived is like the oddest topic for us to discuss, and that's the only video floating around the internet in which I appear with him, and it's a big regret of mine.
You know, to that note, one of the only videos that I've taken with him myself in the past few years was a video of him and I playing chess when we went. And this just sort of speaks to his characters. He was teaching me all these high-level chess moves in the same hour that he taught me how to clean a fish. You know, just he was a renaissance man as much as anybody, I think.
So I just shared a link in the chat that you wanted to get out there, I believe. What is this article that I just
So this is basically like an obituary, and probably my favorite tribute or obituary that was written about my father. You can find, if you Google his name, you'll find a lot, but this is my personal favorite. This is written by a guy named Murphy Donovan, who I was never baptized, but I sort of consider him my godfather because it doesn't do quite enough to say he's a family friend. Like, he was much closer in me and all my siblings' lives and in my father's life than just a family friend. On top of that, he's just a phenomenal author, and I think that this piece is worth reading. And also, to that point, he starts with a quote by Hemingway that I really love, and I think it encapsulates my father's essence perfectly. I don't have it in front of me, but it's something like, nobility doesn't come from being superior to other men. Nobility comes from being superior to your former self. Yeah. And I think that that's just the perfect way to describe the way that my father lived.
Well said. I spoke at length about Alex in a video I did when I came back here for the memorial in July, or was it August? I think it was July.
Yeah,
July.
It was August.
So I shared my thoughts, but I would say coming back here right now, and this is my first time back in Bulgaria since then, that all I've been saying is it feels very incomplete.
I think that incomplete is a perfect way to put that. I mean, my blood is in this, like, my family has some history here, so I have a connection to it that you don't, obviously, just through the family ties, but I mean, it feels incomplete for me as well. Bulgaria and my father were tied together for my entire life. Like, those two things, I didn't have one without the other. So to be here now with him gone has been different, but I love this place. I know that you're more nomadic and sort of around the world, but I'm happy to be here. Me and my siblings got our citizenships here the day of my father's funeral, which I thought was a very sort of beautiful send-off for him.
That was very touching.
Yeah, he brought a few more Bulgarians in as soon as he left, sort of the way he lived.
I almost want to cry.
Don't get me started.
I'm not a very emotional guy, but I remember seeing, was it the 3 of you or 4 of you taking that photo with your Bulgarian ID cards, which I'm very jealous. Can I get one?
Might be too late to adopt, but we'll figure something out.
Well, tell people a little bit about your background, because you're new to the channel, and people know maybe that you're Alex Alexiev's son, but you didn't grow up in Bulgaria.
Yeah, so I'm from the States, was born in Utah and lived in California for most of my life. Have always followed what my father's been doing in terms of literature and writing and geopolitics, and really sort of fell in line. Like, writing is something that I'm very passionate about, so I have this opportunity to follow in his footsteps. I mean, those are big shoes to fill, but something that I'm passionate about and something that would make me really happy to even give a crack at. So, I mean, I moved out here in the last year to spend time with him and sort of train with him as his apprentice, and have no plans to go back.
So now you're full-on Bulgarian. You're a Bulgarian citizen living in Bulgaria.
I'm actually willing to sell my American passport if anybody wants to throw some prices out.
I'm not trying to pick up, but I've got an American passport, and I would argue that there's a lot of tax liability that comes with that passport. But I don't know. If you're watching, what's the status on the border wall to Turkey? Ooh. I just crossed that border. I'm about to cross back in the other direction. So first of all, I wouldn't say it's a wall. I would say it's a fence. And it never was fully completed as far as I'm aware, but the migrant flows have seriously decreased since, I'd say, 4 years ago. But then again, Turkish President Erdogan is threatening to send the refugees to Bulgaria and Greece, so we'll see. That's something I'll be monitoring, of course, over the coming months and years. But I'm not going to focus on it on this broadcast because I want to stick more to meeting or introducing you to the audience, and of course remembering your father and talking a bit about life here in Bulgaria. So how are you finding things there? As someone who spent most of his life in California, I guess I could be speaking about myself as well. Yeah. That's where I'm from. But as someone who spent most of his life in California, how does it feel to live in Sofia?
I really enjoy it. I mean, obviously there's the caveat that I have family history here, and I have family here, and I have, connections through my father that are just great people who spent a lot of time around him. But on top of that, I'm coming from California. It would be hard to find a more different place in the United States than Bulgaria. It's not to get too political, I suppose, but California to me is going in a direction that is not something that I resonated with. And I know my father felt the same way. I mean, he used to talk about how close it was coming to communism. Like certain stories he would read, he'd say, "Oh, this reminds me of being a kid in communist."
Which could you throw in very quickly a little bit about your father's history, your grandfather and communism here in Bulgaria, because the general audience isn't aware.
So my grandfather, by the name of Rayko Alexiev, was a pretty well-known dissident here. He published a newspaper that he did entirely by himself. My father told me that my grandmother told him once that Rayko would go into his room, lock himself in his room with a pack of cigarettes on Friday, and write the entire newspaper and illustrate the entire newspaper by himself and publish it on Sunday. So that just kind of spoke to his work ethic. But it was a popular cartoon here, and he was a popular guy, somebody that was well known. Unfortunately, my father doesn't have a lot of memories of him because when my father was about, I think 3 or 4 years old, my grandfather was not kidnapped, he was just taken into the communist, the Bulgarian wing of the Soviet police here. But
I'm pretty sure it was right around the corner from somewhere around here. Maybe not right around the corner, but it wasn't the gulag. It was like some jail, as far as I understand. Someone's saying, "Josh, why can't we donate to you?" I think there are some crypto links under my videos, but I'm not seeking a lot of donations. But you can email me. We can talk about that. No, continue on. Continue on. I don't want to interrupt this.
I mean, it's a long, very deep story that's worth looking into. But basically, they tortured and killed my grandfather. My father.
And thank you, by the way, Jesus Max. That's very much appreciated.
So my grandfather, who my father doesn't really have a lot of memories of because he was so young, was tortured and killed. And from that point, my father said he grew up thinking that escaping communism was the pursuit of his life.
My channel is demonetized. It's fully demonetized. That's why there's no what do you call it? Super chat. Sorry.
No, I didn't realize that's how it worked. If you get demonetized, they completely take away the ability for people to.
Yeah, you can't give me super chats. My whole channel's
How
demonetized.
long has it been demonetized for?
Several months.
Was that because of the video they had?
No, it's not. It's a separate story. But I mean, YouTube's threatening to take down all channels now that are not commercially viable. So, who knows how long I'll even be on this platform?
Oh, there goes my channel too.
But no, continue on. I mean, it's an important story.
I mean, yeah, it's probably a longer story than a live stream could take. And I wish this is one of those things I really wish I'd sat down with him and gotten every detail from his memory. But it's something that even he didn't really like to talk about a lot. So, I mean, a lot of this is.
And it's also something he had to piece together, right? Because
Yeah.
he didn't have much of a memory. He was so young.
Exactly. I mean, so eventually he ended up, to skip a lot in the middle, eventually he ended up escaping communism, where he then went to Germany and worked in Germany before eventually getting like a asylum in the United States. But one thing that he told me that I always thought was interesting is that after he escaped communism, after he got into West Germany, he said that everything else after that was just free time. Not free time in that sense, but everything after that, like he would be happy with. And I think that is one of the reasons he was so generous and so kind and so just such a magnanimous person. Is he really believed that after escaping communism, everything else was like a gift. Like he got away, he finished what his life goal was, which was to get out of there, and everything after that was, you know.
Do you know the answer to that question, why your father didn't stay in Germany?
Well, his goal was always to get to the U.S., and he was offered like political asylum. So he stayed in Germany for 4 years, where he was working like odd jobs just to send money back home to his family in Bulgaria, try to get money to them somehow, and picked up the language, and then eventually moved to the U.S.
And the rest is history.
Yeah.
I mean, he had part of various significant think tanks and government agencies and rose up to pretty high levels there.
It's really a shame that Josh and I were speaking about this the other day, that he doesn't have a Wikipedia page or anything.
Well, let's fix that.
Yeah, we're gonna fix that. So, yeah, hopefully within the next 6 months to a year.
Jesus Max is saying respect to the story of your dad.
That means a lot to me. It really makes my heart happy.
One thing you said really stuck with me, that how upon escaping communism and arriving to freedom, I'll hold that thought. How do you get involved in a think tank? Or you mean, how did Alex Alexiev get involved in a think tank? Or how do you get involved in a think tank here? I'm not sure exactly what the question is. Clarify, and I'll continue on with this. So your point that you're making about how upon reaching freedom, at that point it was like he didn't need anything more.
Exactly.
And I think I could see that in him to the day he died. That there was such incredible gratitude in him. Someone who had his knowledge, who had seen so much of the world, who had documented so much, who had incredible success as an analyst in multiple fields, could have really been expecting that people, throw more praise upon him, could have been expecting more recognition, and he wasn't at all.
Right.
It was like he acted like he had too much recognition in a day and age when people who haven't accomplished 1/1000th of what he did are demanding more and more recognition. And that set an example for me.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you said in your video that they don't make them like they used to, and I'm obviously not maybe old enough to claim that I haven't met or that I'll never meet anyone like him again. But it's hard for me to imagine finding somebody with that level of like success and his passions being that humble.
So the think tank question is, he's asking if you need a special resume to be in a think tank, and he only knows of the concept of think tanks in the U.S. Now, this is another one of those moments when I'm frustrated that your father isn't here, because he would crack jokes about think tanks, and I don't remember word for word, but he had some joke about a think tank, about how we've got all these think tanks, but not a whole lot of thinking. And I don't know it word for word. I didn't nail it, but he had some joke like that. And if Alex got that question, Jesus Max, he would have gotten some response like that. Like,
absolutely.
okay, we got all these think tanks, but do we really have people thinking? All right, as far as the actual question goes, I think what Alex would have said actually plays to to what's happening in the U.S. You have think tanks galore. I mean, it's not too difficult to get into a think tank in the U.S. Graduate some school with some political science degree, write something, doesn't really matter whether you're accurate or not, network, promote yourself, you're in a think tank. I think that's what have been his attitude.
Absolutely, and networking is obviously I think the biggest part, but I mean just
like to be I remember one time we got as Bulgaria Analytica is affiliated with a think tank. It's affiliated with a think tank that Alex, that your father created, called the Center for Balkan and Black Sea Studies. And it even says here, a project of the Center for Balkan and Black Sea Studies. And I think he would even joke about that. Like, some people would say, we have a think tank here, and he would make a joke out of the think tank, the very think tank he created. So I was saying, someone's saying, you need to be a specialist. I remember one time, someone sent us a job application. I don't remember if it was specifically for Bulgaria Analytica or for the CBBSS website or what, but someone sent an application saying he wanted to be an analyzer. Like he was
that might have been my resume.
Oh, come on. I mean, your English is a little better than that. And it's slipping my memory what Alex's response to that was, but it was definitely something jokingly saying, no, we don't have any analyzers here. We're not looking for any analyzers. I don't remember what he said, but it kind of played to these comments and questions that are coming up. Is your friend Alex connected to any political movement or party? By friend, I think he's asking, is your father
referring to me or my father?
I don't. Yeah, can you clarify whether you're referring to Eric, who's here, or Eric's father, Alex?
I would say my father was fairly conservative. I think that's I mean, he was very libertarian in certain things. You can't put his politics in a box, but in terms of voting habits, like I think conservative would be a good way to put it.
American conservative, though, because or he's asking about you.
Oh, my politics. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I left the States, is because I mean the two-party system really was just driving me crazy. I couldn't find my home in either of the parties, and now I'm sort of apolitical. Like, it's hard to. I mean, not apolitical. I still have my beliefs and convictions that I feel very strongly about, but neither of the two parties in the States represent my beliefs very well. I feel like politics is something that's sort of happening here, and in the past 4 years, I've started to think that I'm just watching it from a bird's eye view. I mean, I can go more into depth about what I think about the elections and the past election, the upcoming election, but right now, I don't really subscribe to a particular party.
And would you say that that's something that's a viewpoint that's been influenced, in which you've been influenced by your father, or is that just something where you've gone out on your own?
I think absolutely. I mean, it would be hard for me to say that any of my beliefs haven't been somewhat influenced by my father. I think that I was very lucky to grow up in a household, in a place like California that's very. I mean, where I lived was very liberal. I mean, you're aware of. He went to school in the same town that I'm from.
And I'm from Los Angeles, which is even more.
Los Angeles, exactly. But I had the privilege of growing up in a household with like very European values, and a father who had escaped communism. So I heard all these stories growing up and knew sort of firsthand that all the propaganda I was hearing in public school and in the news every day, like maybe wasn't the full story. So I was able to kind of think critically about that sort of thing because of my father.
This is a good question about your father, and I think you can handle it. So he's asking whether, or actually, I don't know if it's about you or your father. All right, let's handle you first. You just arrived here. You're not very involved in Bulgarian politics, are you?
No, I'm not. I will say though, and this is maybe not something to be proud of. This maybe is the problem with voting in general, but there was recently an election here in Bulgaria, and now that I'm a citizen, I did want to vote in it. I wanted to express that.
Oh, he was asking about you, not your father. All right, so.
In regard to what? The Bulgarian politics?
Yeah. Wait. Before we touch on Brexit, which I don't know if we're going to do, he was asking about you with regard to Bulgarian politics.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't know enough to give like an informed opinion. I know that if I start talking about Bulgarian politics, it'll end up somewhere in the Bulgarian media. But I will say there was an election here recently, and I really did want to vote, but it's sort of one of the problems with voting is that I was in the car on the way to the voting booth, like Googling as much as I could, trying to find out. And while I was doing that, I was able to step back and self-reflect that maybe if I'm having to Google the politicians on the way to the voting booth, I shouldn't be voting. I ended up not voting, but it was sort of a good example for me to.
Well, I'd say you have time to figure out.
Oh, absolutely. I intend to get involved with
although
politics,
the election's still going on, or the election cycle's still going on, right?
Yeah.
So maybe you don't have so much time
to
figure things out.
I decided in the car when I had that thought that I was going to sit this one out and maybe take a year or two to get more knowledge.
Yeah, all right, I see the comments. There was a big development in the UK today with Farage announcing that his Brexit party is going to back the Conservatives, but we're focused today on Bulgaria and on the Alexiev name and family. All right, we're getting a question. I'm very interested in the political culture of countries that are not known to the public. That's why I love Josh's work. Well, thank you very much, Jesus Max. He covers a lot of elections in countries that aren't in the focus for most. Well, what's the inspiration for that? It's your father, before the Center for Balkan and Black Sea Studies. I was doing reporting for that website before Bulgaria Analytica was even launched, and then of course Bulgaria Analytica. And it was your father who brought me out to this region. I deep inside, I'd known for years that I wanted to cover geopolitics on the ground around the world, but I got that opportunity thanks to your father.
Now let me ask you this: when did you meet my father before coming to Bulgaria? Did you two sit down and have a conversation?
Yes, but not. It's not like we hashed out the plans to launch. I mean, back then there wasn't even a concept for Bulgaria Analytica. Back then, the Center for Balkan and Black Sea Studies existed as a think tank, but it didn't even have a website. We weren't even sure. Everything was up in the air. I was even reconsidering my career in journalism. I thought I might even just go some completely different route, maybe become a travel writer or something. I didn't know where things were going to go. But then very quickly upon arriving here, Alex said, let's launch the news website for the Center for Balkan and Black Sea Studies, and things grew from there, and I went out on my own and did reporting on my own, and I'm forever grateful. Why exactly was Eric's family in trouble with the communist regime?
So my grandfather was like a very outspoken political dissident who, I mean, the reason that he was arrested was he made some cartoon. I mean, he wrote very disparaging cartoons about all the big political figures at the time. But the one that got him arrested was something that he wrote that was very pejorative, I guess you could say, in regard to Stalin. And I think within a few days, they came and picked him up over this cartoon. Stalin has a long memory for people that insult him, from what I've heard.
Well, and yeah, I guess had tentacles.
Yeah, and tentacles
well beyond Moscow.
Yeah.
Which I guess is something that is rooted in the current coverage and slant of Bulgaria Analytica, although we don't really need to get into that. Does your family have a World War II history?
Ooh. So on my mother's side, my grandfather's father, so my great-grandfather, fought in World War II. I don't believe anybody on my father's side was involved.
So, let's rehash some of the story. Why not? Your father escaped to Germany,
Right.
and then he went directly to the States after that?
He came back. So he came back to help one of his friends escape, and to make sure that, because his brother and his mother, my grandmother, stayed behind in Bulgaria. So he came back to help one of his friends escape, and then to try and convince his brother to escape as well. And then from there, he went back to Germany and then to the States.
All right, so we're getting more. The question is, since I'm Jewish, yes, you're assuming correctly. The whole world knows I'm Jewish. That's no secret.
Before we got on this stream, Josh told me, he was like, "Watch, somebody in the comments is gonna say something about me being Jewish."
No, those aren't the live stream comments. Those are the comments under my video reports when people are commenting that they got to get the Jew out of their country. No, since I'm Jewish, does my family have a World War II history? Not really. My family got out of Europe before the Holocaust. A portion of it moved to Israel, or back then the British Mandate of Palestine, and the rest of my family ended up in the U.S. And I don't really have a family World War II history, which I guess is something I'm very lucky to say, and probably part of the reason why I'm here. Then the next question is, Bulgarian governing party similar to our Conservative Party? By our, you mean the Tories, right? You're commenting from the UK, yeah? Okay, yeah, you are. Okay, is the Bulgarian governing party similar to our Conservative Party, or am I totally wrong? Do you want to take this, or should I?
He or she is talking about Garrett, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you go ahead with that one.
Okay, so
speak out of turn.
So the Bulgarian governing party is the pro-European party. Now, here at Bulgaria Analytica, people might say the nominally pro-European party. Your father might say the nominally conservative party. So I guess that might tie back to a previous question with regard to the refugees and Bulgaria being a gatekeeper. That might have come up. So yeah, on some issues, the ruling party here, GERB, is pretty conservative, has aligned itself with other conservatives and conservative factions within the parliament here. Definitely with regard to the refugee crisis, they're pretty conservative. But then again, there would be, I was going to compare to the U.S. The U.S. is something totally different. They're not totally in alignment with the conservatives in the UK. Even though this is the pro-European party here, there's still fairly strong ties to Russia and even Turkey, and there's quite a bit of difference between the conservatives here and the conservatives in the UK, and definitely the conservatives in the US. I heard about special relations between Macedonia and Bulgaria. Can you specify on that?
You were in Macedonia recently, right?
Now it's North Macedonia.
Yeah,
I spent a lot of time in Macedonia. I've not spent so much time in North Macedonia. I've covered Macedonia at length. I've covered the Macedonian name dispute. I've covered the Macedonian protests that turned into the Gruevski government being overthrown and the Zaev government covering the power. I covered the elections when Zaev won or didn't win but managed to get in anyway. Everything is complicated with regard to Macedonia. I'll sum it up very briefly in a way that someone, North Macedonia, I'm not used to saying North Macedonia, shows how little time I've spent there this year compared to others. So someone who I interviewed once on this channel, I think made the following point, which is, with regard to each of Macedonia, or now North Macedonia's neighbors, here are the issues. With Bulgaria, there is a dispute over national identity and language. So generally speaking, Bulgarians, which your father even wrote about, he argued in a piece about this, that Macedonian is really Bulgarian.
Yeah.
So you see, there you go, you've got the dispute between Macedonia and Bulgaria over the language. You've got the dispute between Macedonia and Greece over the name, although that's now resolved, I would say, which is also a dispute over the identity. You've got dispute between Macedonia and Albania over ethnic matters. The Albanians make up a large portion of Macedonia, and many Albanians still seek a greater Albania. And to the north, you've got a dispute over the church, where Serbia still has control over the Macedonian church. I hope that answers your question to some extent. Both are Orthodox and seem to still have a significant part of the population trying to be closer to Russia. I'd say Russophilia is stronger in Bulgaria than in Macedonia. Back when there was a geopolitical tug of war going on as the Gruevski government was falling out of power and the Zaev government was rising to power, there was a lot of talk back then about Russian influence in back then in Macedonia. The Russian government was backing Gruevski and opposing Zaev, and the West was backing Zaev and opposing Gruevski. At least, I mean, I would argue even rather overtly. It was pretty obvious. But I wouldn't say a huge portion of the population in North Macedonia would identify as Russophiles.
What?
Do you want to chime in
Well,
about
I was
this
just curious,
at all?
what, because you said that you thought that there's a more pro-Russian sentiment in Bulgaria than North Macedonia. Like, what gives you that impression? Just being on the ground there, or just seeing the media, how the media operates?
Well, if you walk around here on, what is it, March 3rd,
Yeah.
you're going to see Russian flags everywhere. And in Bulgaria, there are many, many people for a variety of reasons. One, what they refer to as the Russian liberation of Bulgaria from the Ottoman Empire,
Right.
the cultural connections, the fact that Bulgaria was a Soviet satellite state, whereas Macedonia was part of Yugoslavia. I mean, I'd say for various reasons.
But it's tangible, like you think. Like
It's very tangible. I mean, still, you walk around Sofia and you can see people selling Russian flags.
Yeah.
I don't see anyone selling, maybe even Turkish flags. I see in the streets of Skopje or some other city in Macedonia. No, I think it's very tangible that I see more Russophilia in Bulgaria than in Macedonia.
I think the Black Sea coast probably has some small effect too, like how much tourism from Russia ends up bleeding its way across the country.
Well, yeah, there's still major ties nowadays, in the form of Russian property ownership here, in the form of Russian tourism, in the form of Russians who've obtain residence or even citizenship. The question: in the former Yugoslavian countries, there is for to mouth UN, NATO, and EU involvement. They're only to call. I think you're saying in the former Yugoslav countries, the UN, NATO, and EU are only there to cause trouble. I think that's what the commenter's saying, which is your opinion, and you're welcome to it. Not Commenters saying not sure if NATO should always be seen as bad influence. It might prevent future wars in the region. Okay, now that's a very interesting. Everyone's food to mouth. Okay, we got comments coming in here. So chime in for 1 second as I keep an eye on something else.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that NATO is always seen as a bad influence, but I mean, I have certain opinions about that. Where how necessary is there ever going to be a day when NATO isn't necessary anymore? I think that should be established as soon as possible, because it had its purpose in its creation, and now I don't know. I just see the way the U.S. has put bases all around Russia, like I don't know.
This is quite the dissenting
viewpoint
here in the Bulgaria Analytica studio. Wait, hold on. Let's give the viewers a little more context. So, all right. I guess this is the first point in which we see somewhere where you differ significantly with your father.
Yeah.
So
I just think it's this it's U.S. aggression. And again, I'm not casting any aspersions about Russia at all, but I think that when you start putting bases all around somebody, that's to me a very aggressive maneuver. I think that it's sort of begging on some sort of conflict, which I think that, like I said, NATO should have. They need to decide if there's ever a point where NATO will not be necessary, and then if not, then they really need to restructure the way that it was built, I think. I don't know if I've said that.
Well, like I said, this is a dissenting opinion. Not necessarily in Bulgaria, but certainly.
Well, I think that this is where my father and I agree with politics almost completely, but the world is in a different place now than it was 20 years ago, than it was 50 years ago, than it was 100 years ago. I think that sort of goes without saying. So I think that for him and I to have the exact same politics would be sort of absurd, because we're from two completely different times in the course of the world,
And I think that's very interesting to get into some of the context to your viewpoint, some of the background. Your father grew up in a place where there were horrific repressions, and his father was murdered by a Russian or Soviet-backed regime at a very young age.
Right.
And you grew up in, granted, all kinds of issues in California, but you grew up in relative freedom in California. And I think that plays a big role into the viewpoint and the worldview he developed, and into the worldview you developed.
Right. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, again, it would be absurd if we had the same politics. It's not possible. He's come from a completely different life than I have,
But then
it would feel disingenuous for me to just take other people's experiences to form my worldview.
All right, let's see what some of the commenters are saying. One's saying that NATO is critical to many conflicts and we shouldn't glorify Russia. Another one is saying Russia surrounded by these people. Russia had a lunatic as a leader. They would do something about it. Another one saying Russia failed to prevent NATO influence after the fall of the Soviet Union. NATO takes the opportunity to expand influence. Well, from the standpoint of certain countries in Eastern Europe, let's say, if indeed the population is very pro-NATO and, let's say, very anti-Russia, which isn't so much the case here, but definitely is the case in certain countries in Eastern Europe. I would say there are reasons for that, and I mean they didn't just dream up these ideas. A lot of these people grew up in the Soviet Union.
Absolutely not.
Some of them grew up in satellite states. Some of them lived through their country being invaded by Soviet troops, only to years later seen relative prosperity.
Right.
And geopolitics, I'd say, is very tangible in this part of the world. Here, for that matter, there's a lot of sentiments, I would say, focus more toward Turkey than Russia, which interestingly is a NATO ally. But I would say that there's a lot of fear toward Muslim immigration here, and maybe NATO, it's not the role of NATO to resolve that issue, but here a lot of people say that their country was under 500 years of not just Ottoman rule, but they call it slavery. And that factors into the sentiments and the viewpoints people develop and the reasons for getting into or not getting into various alliances and unions. Go for it.
No, I agree. I think I've just come from such a non-interventionist position myself that I can easily understand why somebody would have these sentiments in Bulgaria and in Eastern Europe. But I guess I'm still sort of bogged down in my American identity. But I mean the U.S.'s involvement is really more, I guess, the thing that I find to be egregious at this point. Like maybe not egregious, but just a little bit over the top.
Which is interesting to hear because, at least with this backdrop, I'm used to hearing that the Russian involvement and influence is egregious and promotes nothing but authoritarianism and destroys economies and whatnot.
Yeah, see that it's interesting. I mean, I guess this goes into a deeper. Maybe this goes into a topic that we don't want, but I mean, I see the way that California is now, and I see just some of the news stories that you read in the States and in California. It's like, man, how well is this working for us? You know, like, I don't know. There's a lot about politics in the States that makes me think like, maybe we shouldn't be the ones just like shoving our agenda down everybody else's throats when I see things that make me disgusted on a day-to-day basis in the States, you know. But I guess that's a topic for another day.
So we have a comment saying, I am I think it says non-interventionist. We have a comment with Friedman and bicep. I don't think my bicep's that big. I need to do a little work on my bicep, but thank you. Do you guys think California is the future of the entire U.S.? That's a good question to pose to you. Maybe that's going to be your next Bulgaria Analytical article.
Gosh, I really hope not. I mean, it's just it's hard to see it going any other way, to be honest. I mean, you look at really demographics is what's changed the politics in California so severely in the past 30 years since Reagan was the governor. Like, the demographic shift is really the reason why politics are going a certain way there. And I mean those demographics are becoming increasingly the standard in certainly southern states, but really most states are like having this huge demographic shift, and that I would be shocked if, I mean, I'm sort of somebody who thinks that Trump is probably going to lose this next election. If he loses this next election, I would really be shocked if a Republican wins again in the next decade and a half, 2 decades. Until the pendulum shifts back, like I can't imagine how it would be possible.
So the commenter's saying, and I want to get your reaction to this, in terms of ethnic proportions, that change toward a Hispanic majority and therefore a blue stronghold. Is that true or no?
I completely agree with that. Absolutely. I mean, you just look at the voting trends amongst Hispanics. Like I think, gosh, like 70-something% Democrat, and then you look at illegals, they're easily paid to vote in a certain way. They don't really care that much, and I think that.
You got any proof of that?
I'm not off the top of my head. Okay, maybe that's a conspiracy, but you can look at Acorn and all these things. Look at how people vote in the South American countries when NGOs go in there and sort of tell them. I don't want to get too conspiratorial on your live stream, I guess.
Well, I think if indeed this is correct, there's been a shift. There used to be the stereotype of the conservative Catholic Hispanic in California, among other places.
Yeah, and I guess that's sort of the interesting part is Mexico is very Catholic, but something about coming into a country illegally, I think that speaks to a degradation of morals that probably means they aren't as religious. And I'm speaking mostly about people who come in with green cards, not actual people who are born, Hispanics who are born in the States.
Is there anything California's doing right? Why do all these people want to live there?
I mean, I heard a quote once on a podcast a long time ago that said that California is like the beautiful girl in school. You know, like she really doesn't have to work hard at all. She can just coast by on her looks. And I mean, that's California. It's such a beautiful state. It's such a beautiful place to live. The weather's amazing. You have this huge beach line. You have the Central Valley, which produced, what is that, isn't that like the 12th biggest economy in the world or something like that? I don't know. California has everything going for it, and it's just, it was too good for too long. Like, if you have everything just given to you and you have such a perfect, like, oasis, like, it couldn't go up anymore. It could only kind of shoot itself in the foot, and I think that's what we're seeing with California. It was just, to this comment, nobody can afford to live in San Francisco anymore. Nobody can, even where I'm from and where Josh went to school, was getting absurdly expensive. My rent was, I think, 3 times what I pay here, and to share a house with 5 other people.
Actually, I want to touch on that, and it brings back to life in California, an article I just wrote. But I was smiling because we got the comment, were you guys at Skid Row in LA?
No.
Have you?
No, I never have. But that would actually
you want to hear my answer to the question?
Absolutely.
So I've spent such little time in the States in recent years, even though I do still have some work based in California. But yes, I have been to Skid Row. I actually used to have a bit of a habit or an occasional hobby of
be careful.
of driving. It's a little nerve-wracking.
Habits and Skid Row don't go well together.
But I don't know if what I've seen in some of the headlines is true, but apparently something akin to the plague has come back.
Yeah.
I don't know what. So I guess I've seen all these news stories. I don't know to what extent this is hyperbole and exaggeration, but maybe Skid Row has gotten way worse since I've last been there.
I mean, it follows that if you have this, what is it? It's like 40,000 people, I think.
Oh, it's that much now?
I think so, yeah. I think, let's say 30,000 to be safe. When you have that many people many of them a lot of them are illegals from other countries where they don't have the same vaccines as us. They have different strains of like mutated diseases. And you just compile them all together, and there's no sanitation, there's no medicine or anything. Like, obviously there's going to be some diseases, at least the way that I think about it. Obviously some horrible diseases are going to come about eventually. I'm not saying that they're there yet, but it follows logically to me that would happen. I mean, the place is Hooverville on steroids.
Someone's saying, I heard all those liberal cities ironically face a homeless crisis resulting in the return of pests. I actually, before I left California and the US, did some investigative reporting in which I found myself embedded with homeless people all the time. I was looking into some alleged corruption relating to local nonprofit, very closely connected to local government, basically milking homeless people of their social security benefits. So I used to spend a lot of time with the homeless in California, but I don't anymore. And I'd like to get back to the point we were discussing a moment ago about the cost of living there, and maybe versus the cost of living here, and maybe we could discuss lifestyle there versus here. What do you have to say?
Well, I mean
just in terms of the opportunities that come from the arbitrage.
Well, I guess just to start with the actual price of housing, like I mentioned, I think my rent in California to live in a house with 4 other guys I paid 3 times as much as I pay here. I mean, it's almost unlivable. Like, so much of your money each month is going, and that's in a house. Like, I wasn't in an apartment by myself. I lived with a house with tons of roommates. Whereas here, I mean, I live by myself and pay a quarter or a third of that.
In a nice part of town, right?
In a nice part of town as well, too. I could pay, I mean, what I pay now is sort of absurd. Like, I should be paying a bit less, but it's nothing interesting. But I mean, here, everything about the price of living is cheaper. I can't think of anything. Although I guess name brands, I did see a pair of
Nikes might cost more.
Yeah, they cost more here.
I didn't buy my Air Force Ones here. It's a secret where I bought them.
But I mean, you lived here for longer than I did. Maybe you can expand on that.
Incredible arbitrage. So I recently wrote a couple articles for Bulgaria Analytica. It'd be nice if we'd throw them in the chat. One of them that followed from an interview I did with Andrew Henderson, known as the Nomad Capitalist, that I did with him in Montenegro earlier this year. And something that I did not mention in the article is that he brought up California, and he brought it up as an example of a giant marketing success. And he was comparing and contrasting the marketing of investment migration opportunities in different countries in the region. And he was stressing that a place like, say, Macedonia, where recently there's been a lot of economic freedom created, could really stand to grow significantly or maybe even boom if it was marketed the way California is marketed.
Right.
So he's saying when anyone thinks California, they think of the things you brought up.
Yeah.
But when they think of Macedonia or, North Macedonia or Bulgaria or many of the countries in the region that have slashed taxes and that have created a tax and regulatory environment that could be very nice for businesses and also could be a great place for expats like you, like me, not so much you, to live.
Yeah.
But this region isn't marketed like that.
Let me go in there.
Until who admits it?
No, you're talking about North Macedonia?
Oh.
I made a joke to somebody once. I thought I was just bantering, but I met somebody who said they're from North Macedonia. And I said, oh yeah, I'm from Bulgaria too. And I didn't realize how much that was.
Those are fighting words.
Yeah, so they got
a lot of people don't understand that. In this region, comments like that, those are fighting words.
I'm still figuring out the Balkan sense of humor, that's for sure.
Yeah, I remember vividly, I wasn't there at the time, but not too long after I arrived in this region, there was the first football match in a while between Serbia and Albania, and it ended with some drone being flown over the field and a big melee. And actually I saw I wasn't there when the actual violence unfolded, but I arrived shortly thereafter in then Macedonia, now North Macedonia, and that was ethnic related violence between ethnic Albanians and the Macedonian forces, and about 20 people were killed, and I did a report from the scene, and pretty nasty stuff. It still can be a tough region. You don't experience that walking around on the streets every day, but those tensions still simmer beneath the surface.
Yeah. Those will linger for a long time to come, I think.
And we're coming up on 1 hour, and I'm also practically at midnight here local time. We're coming up on 1 hour, and we're going to need to wrap up the broadcast. I would say that coming to Bulgaria has been a whopping success for both of us. Unfortunately, your father is no longer here and is gone too soon. But maybe we'll do a little bit more in the future about opportunities here in Bulgaria and in the region. I've been pumping Istanbul and Turkey a lot lately, and I would argue there's more bang for the buck over there on that side of the border than on this one at the moment. But that all can change, and that has to do with some of the economic troubles over there. Jesus saying thanks for the live chat. Jesus Max, thank you for your participation. Thank you everyone else
thank you for the questions.
who joined in. This was fun. We did it on a Monday. I didn't know if anyone would be tuned in. Any last thoughts, Eric?
No, that's really it for me. I just wanted to thank you for having me on here. I tune into Josh's live streams whenever I see him as well. So it was a pleasure to be on. And thank you guys for contributing in the comment section. It's a lot of fun.
Quick question, which countries am I going to next? I'm headed back to Turkey briefly, then a quick trip across Europe before I head to a surprise destination for the winter.
You think Osama bin Laden?
Oh, well, we don't have time to get into Osama bin Laden.
Another
right
time,
now.
though, I would like to go into that. I appear to be
email Eric and ask him. Maybe he'll write about it. But yeah, you can find Eric's work on BulgariaAnalytica.org. You can find my work on BulgariaAnalytica.org as well, as in addition to this YouTube channel. Blagodaria Nogo. What does that mean?
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much.
Doskoro.
See you soon. Ciao.
Thanks a lot, guys.